about an hour ago, I watched Microsoft's introductory video on their new chip that they just came out for doing quantum stuff, and it introduces a new state of matter. Yeah, that sounds like something I would guess. Didn't barbecue anybody, but about 3 p.m., we're all sitting there, everybody's having their little fancy afternoon cotillion out on the lawn, and all of a sudden, ka-chunk. Well, I wouldn't work for a startup just because it's a startup. It's got to be a startup that you believe in and that you're like, holy crap, I can't believe they're letting me be a part of this because it's such a genius idea and it's going to make so much money. Hey, I'm Dave. Welcome to Shop Talk. I'm joined as always by my co-host Glenn. How you doing, Glenn?
I am well, Dave. How are you?
I am also well. So this week I was postulating on Twitter about some of the harder interview questions that I've seen at Microsoft in my day. And the one that came up that really kind of got some interest and traction was one of my favorites that I think is probably the hardest question and that haunted me for a little while after hearing it. And that is, when you look in a mirror, why is everything reversed left-right, but not up and down? And it's true, people generally say, oh, because you got two eyes and they're in the same plane. But no, if you cover one eye or you just close one eye, it's still the exact same. It's still reversed left to right, but not up and down. And so the question is, why is that? Why? And if you lie on your side and look in the mirror, now it's reversed up and down. So it's always that same. Is this the trick of your brain? Is it an optical thing? What's actually going on and why? And so I'd like to hear your guesses in the comments, or not your guesses, because I want to hear your explanation as to why this phenomenon occurs. So let us know in the comments, and I'll call out some of the best answers in the next episode. How's that?
Cool. So was that a question that you faced in one of your recruiting episodes?
I don't think I got it in my recruiting loop. I think it came up at lunch or something very early on.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So what brought that to your mind? Was that?
It's just an old question, and I was posting about interview questions and trying to think what was the best one I ran across, and I really like that one. So, because you kind of have to think it through, and you don't have to get the right answer, but I want to see how you think it through. If you're just like, oh, I don't know, how does the mirror know what's on the other side? That's a mystery. That's a bad sign, right? But
yeah. That's the short. Yeah, you probably don't get to the second stage of the interview with that kind of response. Yeah. I'm a computer programmer. I don't know how mirrors work. Talk to a physics guy. Yeah.
So what do we got for questions this week? Should be fewer.
Yeah, we got a shorter list because we had just the Shop Talk episode there, but we got some good ones. Let's start off a couple sort of fun ones, as I like to do.
Okay.
Bjarki, 1977. Did you know about your hometown's connection with Elon Musk's grandfather?
A little bit. I know his mom was born in Regina. Whereas they like to say his mom came out of Regina originally. And
didn't we all?
Yeah, well, I did. You did.
Yeah, both of us. Yep. Yeah.
So far, that's 3 for 3. That's like 100%. If you count Mrs. Musk.
60% of the time. Yeah.
So the father, as far as I know, was into a social party called the CCF, if you remember them in Saskatchewan, something Credit Commonwealth Foundation. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was basically a socialist
communist
party.
Credit, but it was the early stages of the socialists. Yeah.
But it was kind of reactionary, conservative, really restrictive, and also socialist. It was a weird party, but it wasn't socialist or restrictive or conservative enough for the father. So he moved back to South Africa at some point, as I understand it. We're not back to, he moved to South Africa, looking for a different political environment than he went to South Africa. So
yeah,
that's about all I know.
I just popped up some stuff on it. So it's his grandfather, and then his grandmother, I guess, they were both chiropractors, but his grandmother was the first female chiropractor in Canada.
Oh, really?
Which I didn't know until, 30 minutes ago. That was kind of a neat little thing too.
Yeah.
But we've got lots of good connections in Saskatchewan. Matt Groening's grandfather and
father, I think, Homer.
Yeah. Was it? I think
his name's not Homer, but he's
yeah, his grandfather was the photographer guy.
Well, that's his grandfather, guy.
Yeah,
his father.
Yeah, and a whole bunch of folks. But yeah, and then don't even get us started on hockey. Lots of guys. Okay, 9 Rune 5. So in our last Shop Talk, there you're talking about the database that you made for that software company that you guys had, and then you were talking about have a barbecue for the millionth customer. So 9 Rune 5 says, why would you barbecue the millionth customer?
Yeah, that sounds like something I would guess. Didn't barbecue anybody, but about 3 p.m., we're all sitting there. Everybody's having their little fancy afternoon cotillion out on the lawn. And all of a sudden, ka-chunk, sprinklers. And most people took it in good humor. I mean, I ran and I shut it off within about 10 seconds, or maybe 20 seconds. Most people took it in good humor, but there were some, older ladies that were not impressed that they got wet on an afternoon or sprinkled anyway. And so there were some hurt feelings, but that was the only downer on the 1 millionth customer barbecue.
So usually I seem to be fairly unaware of Americanisms, Canadianisms, or how I speak, but cotillion, there's a word that tweaks my brain.
Yeah, I'm
again.
Canadian too, so I don't really. Cotillion is like a big party you have for Southern belles or something.
Is that what it is? Yeah, like a coming out sort of thing. Is that a Southern American sort of quinceañera kind of thing?
I don't know. Let us know in the comments because we're clearly clueless on it. So I assumed if you had like it in the Southern states and you were out on the lawn on a Sunday afternoon and they were all, tablecloths and people sitting there, that's a cotillion. And I just made up the word.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it really is.
When you use it, I was like, I don't know what he's talking about.
That's my Mike Tyson moment there where I just take a word I've heard before and throw it in there because it sounds vaguely appropriate.
That's my favorite Mike Tyson quote. It's from you. Yeah, well, I try to fight. When I fight from the whole barometer of the situation. Yeah.
The whole barometer.
The whole barometer, man. Yeah, not just part of it, like the whole barometer. That's how dedicated he is. At Camera Shy, on a test, U.S. students were asked, "Where's Toronto?" 58% answered with the Lone Ranger. What do you think of that, Kemosabe?
Oh, Tonto. Okay, it took me a minute.
Well, when I was reading this, I'm like, should I say Toronto or Toronto? Toronto?
Yeah, I guess they generally say Toronto, don't they? Something like that.
I think that's the Toronto way of saying it, is you kind of throw it together. Yeah.
There's one Tonto joke I remember from being a child that is probably still acceptable, and that is Tonto and the Lone Ranger are out walking through the plains or wherever they happen to live, and all of a sudden they're surrounded by
a cotillion.
Yeah, probably looking for the cotillion. And suddenly they're surrounded by a bunch of hostile indigenous people or natives or however the proper term was for them in that time and place. And Lone Ranger gets pretty scared and he turns to Tonto and says, well, what are you going to do? Tonto looks back and says, what do you mean we, white man?
Exactly. Yeah. He doesn't have to outrun the bear. John Sims. Wasn't LPT, and we were talking about that too, I think you and I both sort of you had a guess as to what it was. Wasn't LTP the abbreviation for local port? LPT1 and LPT2 were common. Usually they're for parallel ports, as I recall. I think someone else had another suggestion in the comments too.
Yeah, it's either line print terminal or local print terminal, but the PT is print terminal. I'm pretty sure of that. The L I've seen done for both. I've seen local and line. So I can't tell you an authoritative answer on that. Maybe Mark Z would know the answer to that one.
Yeah. Talk to him someday. Find out.
I'll see. We'll find out.
And now Connecticut Aggie, and I want to say Connecticut because that's how my head's wired, but Connecticut Aggie. If you don't use Git command line, what do you use? Source tree?
No, I use Visual Studio Code, and then it's got a little check-in manager and I do use the command line if it gets broken, or if I'm creating a new repo, it's easier to do from the command line, that kind of thing. So if I can do it in the UI and it's simple, I do it. If I can't, I go to the command line. And if I can't, I escalate to the Netherlands Home Office.
Yeah. Then it's a Rutgers problem to figure that out. Woo Shell. At 24 minutes, 30 seconds. This kind of weird performance differences seem to occur regularly throughout computing history. He said, wasn't the 6502 and the 1541 floppy drive also faster than the one in the Commodore 64 itself?
No, they were both 1 megahertz. The one difference was that the VIC chip does memory refresh and some other stuff, so it steals cycles from the CPU. So because the floppy drive doesn't have any video circuitry, it doesn't have to share cycles with a video refresh, and so it's maybe 5 to 10% faster. You could get the same effect by blanking the screen on the C64, but other than that, the CPUs actually run at the same clock rate.
The 1541, that was the Commodore 64 was a 1541 drive.
That was its disk drive. And so the disk drives on the Commodore line of computers were unique in that they actually had their own processors, RAM, operating system, and everything built into the drive to make the base computer that much cheaper. So it had no circuitry to control the drive. It just had a simple little serial port that it could talk to a drive if you plugged it in, but it was up to the drive to do all the work. And printers were not like that, but the disk drives were. So,
and those 1541, I remember why it was a nice packaged piece, like quite nicely finished too.
Yeah, they were good looking. The early ones really overheated badly. I had one where it kind of melted the case and it had to go back for service. And of course, because we bought it from Computer House and not, the Bay or Eaton's or a major authorized reseller, it took like 6 to 9 months to get it back. So I had the tape drive for like 6 months.
Excellent. He goes on to say, Wushell there, or they go on to say, people have been using the 160 megahertz ESP8266 as a Wi-Fi add-on for their 16 megahertz Arduino AT mega projects for many years until someone found out you could use them as a standalone mini microcontroller as well.
I didn't know that. I mean, I really skipped the 8266 and I've always used the ESP32, which had the Wi-Fi built in. So
when did those ESP32s start becoming a thing?
About 6 years ago, I would guess, maybe 7.
Yeah.
Been a while now.
Martin Dooley. Dave, have you done any programming on industrial programmable logic controllers?
No, we dabbled in a lab in college with a PLC, but I've never done anything in 30 years with them. So,
okay, yeah. So he's got a degree in computer and control systems engineering. He did a lot of Fortran, Pascal assembly, that sort of stuff. So he's interested to hear your views on real-time control versus commercial.
Yeah, I have never really done that much real-time systems programming other than on the ESP32 microcontroller, which uses FreeRTOS, so it's a real-time operating system. And we do have some almost real-time scheduling of when the next LED frame gets drawn, things like that. But that's the only time critical or time sensitive stuff that I've done, actually. Everything else is just code that gets scheduled like any other piece of code. And Task Manager has something interesting that it used to do in the original versions. In the very early lines of code of startup, it would push its own priority up to high so that if you were trying to get Task Manager, as soon as the process got rolling, it would flip its priority to high and it would be quite responsive, allowing you to end processes on a system that was highly loaded or something was stealing all the CPUs cycles. Now, apparently it still does something to that end, but I don't think it's as effective or it happens much later into the process because you can have a really borked system and try to bring up Task Manager and it will launch the process, but you don't get a Task Manager UI for a long time, if ever. And I wonder if that's a regression in functionality from the original or if it's more complicated these days. I don't know.
A long time or if ever?
Yeah, if the system is really hung and you've got 92 cores of action going on and you've got one Task Manager process that is just an equivalent peer to 184 other processes, for example, then it's going to take a long time to come up.
Okay. Wow. I like this one. Old fart, and it's the OLDE with the PH. That's like just nailed it on both ends there. Hey, Dave, what happens with an LLM when you feed it a document that turns out to be wrong? How do you make it unlearn that information?
Well, you can't unlearn it, but you can inhibit it you can't inhibit it either, but you can replace this information by training it with, factually correct data more. So let's say you had 10 pieces of information, one of them was wrong, but they were all on the same topic. Hopefully the 9 factual ones would push the neural net towards finding the right answer. But if it's just kind of a spurious piece of information, then it is going to taint and pollute your knowledge base. And probably the only way you can get around that at a later date is to add RAG data, which is training data after the fact, which says, if you come to the conclusion X, then don't do that. Kind of how they train policy.
So it's like bad information still sticks then.
Yeah, if it's not trained out by more, better, correct information.
Yeah. Okay. Then he goes on to say, too, he said, I do wish you could try to figure out the qubit and explain it. So I've heard lots of explanations. They all default to the magic box analogy. And he says, that's just spooky, which
it is.
I think to some degree it sort of is. He says he also heard that Google shut down the latest chip because it was creating cuneiform characters all by itself and surprised the developers. It'd be fun to know if that story is true.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the qubits are, again, confusing, and I don't have a better explanation. In fact, about an hour ago, I watched Microsoft's not a press release, it's their introductory video on their new chip that they just came out for doing quantum stuff, and it introduces a new state of matter, the topographical state or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw that running through some Reddit feed or some news thing. It's like, oh, okay, that's, yeah.
I watched it, and I know more about it than I did before. So
Right. You're just as knowledgeable as you were before, except
yes.
Yeah. It sounds more current because you just learned it an hour ago. Yeah.
Yes, my ignorance is fresher.
less inhibited. Yeah. Samuel Magilocusts. Hi, Dave. Love the show. What are your thoughts on working for a startup company? Says he's been presented with such an offer and he's not sure which way to go.
Well, I got a couple thoughts. I wouldn't work for a startup just because it's a startup. It's got to be a startup that you believe in and that you're like, holy crap, I can't believe they're letting me be a part of this because it's such a genius idea and it's going to make so much money and I believe in it and so on and so forth. But that's kind of a young person's gambit, I think. You can afford to take those chances when you're 22 or 24 or just out of college or whatever. But if you're 44 and you got 3 kids and kids going into college soon or whatever, you need your money, it's pretty hard to quit a solid, steady job and then take less to get into a startup in the hopes that you're going to get capital appreciation. So my thing has always been, yeah, do it, but do it while you're young. See how it works out. Don't waste 10 years of your life doing it, but.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on sort of how risk averse or risk tolerant you are too. Some folks are, I know a few folks in the IT stuff that are, I mean, gosh, if they're in the same company for 3 years, that seems like a long time. They're just sort of hopping around and I don't know, they're getting better opportunities or moving company to company or board, but seems
I'm kind of a weird case myself because I am very entrepreneurial, but I'm also super cautious and I won't give up a job, for another one. I'll trade all I have for a little more, but not until a little more proves itself. So
but that's where you were doing the two things. You had your Microsoft gig and then you're doing your stuff on the side and had agreement from Microsoft to do that. And some came in and then you started that company and had those things go and then you'd choose one or the other. And even we were talking earlier about university. Yeah. And working during university and still, taking on and still doing some coding and all sorts of stuff. It's sort of just been part of your nature for a long time. You dedicate hardcore to that one core thing of that job, but you still got the... Yeah,
I've always had the side projects no matter what I'm doing. So it's kind of weird, but that's just the way I've been wired, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that for a while, but couldn't sustain it for any length of time. Toby Jex, would you consider a shop tour video? So I know I've seen some snippets here and there mixed in with your different videos, but it'd be cool to see all your workbenches, storage, next to that infamous lamp, for example. Oh, that's that one in the background there that no one notices. Really be cool to see you walk around and show and tell your shops. He doesn't care if it takes 4 hours, he'd watch the whole thing. And I think you did do one shop video, I think on your 100,000 or? Yeah,
it's been a while. It was a subscriber milestone. Yeah. So it's probably time to clean the shop and do it again. Maybe for the millionth subscriber.
There you go. Yeah, that's coming up soon too. Yeah.
Speaking of which, if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to Dave's Attic, now is a good time to remind you to subscribe to Dave's Attic because we're trying to grow this channel, trying to get some subscribers going on it. And I know that about 50% of the people that watch the episodes appear to be subscribed, which is a lot lower than the main channel because I don't think people are used to subscribing. But even if it means nothing and it doesn't impact the videos you do see, it makes me feel better. So subscribe, please. There you go.
Do it for Dave. Yeah. Subs and likes.
It's all for my ego.
And now we're a short list. We're off to the last question here. Tim Robertson. Right. He says, you guys are the best. I love the relaxed atmosphere of the podcast. I put a question mark in here to trick your algorithm into reading my comment. All the best. Take care. Ooh, damn you, Tim Robertson. He tricked me.
Tricked us.
And that's the other thing. What a lot of this show is about here is answering questions from these episodes and from Dave's garage. So when you've got questions, you put them in the comments. There's a question mark in there. They get pulled out, and then we sort through them and pull them out and answer them in this format. So question mark, hit the subscribe button and like this stuff. And share it.
Yeah, and if you've got an episode suggestion, also put a question mark on it so that we don't miss it. say, here's my idea. Do you like my idea? Question mark, something like that.
I think that's the other piece I need to start doing with some of the stuff. We raised a couple of those here. And, well, that's a good idea. I'll write that. I should make a little list somewhere so at least one or both of us can look back at that too. So
right,
give it a couple ones. So I'll try and build that into my my regimen on Tuesday evenings or early Wednesday mornings when we usually pull these things out. So that's all.
All right.
I got,
well, thanks
Dave.
for joining me today, Glenn.
Hey,
Go ahead.
What was your last week up to? I know, again, you've been doing coding every day and a lot of hard drive stuff.
Yeah, I've been trying to get a full height hard drive set up that I can replicate between several PDP-11s because I kind of want to standardize on something. And so what I've arrived at now is I have two setups. I have an RD54, which is a Maxter 2190 hard drive, 190 meg drive, full height. Well, here I think I've got, oh my goodness, they're heavy. It's a monster. But so that's the drive. And I've got that guy working now on the MFM controller in the PDP-11. And I've also got an Emulex SCSI controller working with a 3 gigabyte, big old, nice sounding, loud, crazy, full height drive. So now I've got two storage setups that I can pretty easily duplicate and then copy the drive data and then spawn up a new PDP-11 without having to completely sysgen the thing from scratch. And so trying to get the drives all formatted.
That 3 gig one, is it about the same size as this one you just showed us?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, they're both same size. Okay, yeah. What's the storage
dimensions.
capacity on that one?
The one I held up is 190 megabytes, and this next one here, I'll grab it, a card attached to it. So, but it's a big full height drive as well. But that's 3 gigabytes.
How many years between those two?
Probably 10 years.
10 years.
Or
okay.
maybe 5.
Yeah.
I should check. Yeah. I don't know the actual release dates.
Yeah. From 190 to 3,000.
Yeah. 3,000 is a lot. 190 is just right. And, the smaller drives like 10, 20, and 40 is too small for BSD units.
Yeah. And what's the biggest one you've got for those machines now?
I've got a couple of, the SCSI one is the biggest. I've got a couple of authentic DEC 2 gigabyte drives that I can't get formatted for long, sad story. They require a VAX to set them up, and I don't have a VAX. So,
okay, that's all I got for you, Dave. So if you got anything to add, you want to wrap it up, it's over to you, man.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us out here in the shop. And in the meantime and in between time, hope to see you next time right here in Dave's Garage. This little chair will be waiting for one of you, and a rocking chair for another who likes to rock, and a big armchair for two to curl up in. All next time on Dave's Garage.